Hi everyone, I'm going to talk about our plan for revising curriculum in order to inform instruction and assessment. So I want to start with what we first noticed. We started investigating different areas of curriculum in our school. And what we noticed is that school-wide with our curriculum, there's some inconsistencies. Some of the big ones that stood out was our application of the standards instances where we're standards loading. We're saying that we're covering a bunch of standards when we're not really assessing them in the way that we should be. And then we're not necessarily teaching to the full depth of those standards in our actual classes and again, showing up on our assessments. Unit planning, we have a lot of different approaches. It seems like there's not one consistent way or an agreement on what a consistent way could look like. And then finally, assessments. So a lot of the questions we're on that lower level of identification, remember, understanding, instead of pushing up into the higher level. And we're not necessarily addressing the depths of the standards covered in a unit, which kind of goes back to our first bullet. But those three strands of application of standards, unit planning, and assessments are kind of three of the big things that we're seeing. So where we started after this to get a sense of how do we start thinking about this or what things could we do to remedy some of these inconsistencies, we started by asking the staff. So we distributed a teacher perception survey, and I pulled a couple of the responses that I saw some trends teachers that could inform some of what we might do. So the first one is a statement: I feel confident that all the teachers in our school have curricula that is well written and easy to understand. And you can see a large majority, 84%, either strongly disagreed or disagreed. So we definitely don't have a consensus saying that as a staff overall, we have a sense that we are doing our curriculum in a way that's easy for others to understand, or we need to look at the template of the way that we're doing it, so that informed that part. Next statement is, I know what other teachers in my grade are teaching. And 73%, again, either strongly disagreed or disagreed with that. So we're seeing some of the collaboration piece, knowing what others are doing, which is going to inform the way that we plan. We're definitely lacking in that area, according to teacher perception. And finally, curriculum is a priority for the school. It is valued, and that value is transparent. So we have 66% either strongly disagreeing or disagreeing. So the staff is not feeling impact that we're making this a priority for us. So after looking at some of these trends in those questions where we're seeing a lot of agreement amongst teachers, the takeaways are our staff needs more time to work on their curriculum, and there should be some things in place for it. The work should be structured, it should be purposeful, it should be transparent, and it should be collaborative. Some of that is coming from those teacher perception questions, and then also just what we know about teachers working together, teachers building knowledge, and curriculum revision. So for each of those, I'll talk about a little bit of the research or the ideas behind it. For the structure, it should be going over time. It should include 20 hours or more of contact time. And structured and purposeful kind of go together here. We should be considering what are the specific student learning outcomes we want to attain. So we're looking at a lot of the curricular aspects, which are the behind the scenes things that happen before you reach the students, but we also want to know what are those long-term goals. Transparent, adults need to know why they need to learn. So we shouldn't be just telling the teachers it's time to revise our curriculum. We want to make sure that they're buying into and they understand the importance of that process for their own learning. And then finally, collaboration. Collaboration is key in any area of learning. So we want to make sure that just as we ask our students to collaborate, we are building in time and structures for our teachers to collaborate. And the end goals, this is bringing in some of that structure and where do we want to get by the end. We want to see better collaboration between our teachers. We want more positive perceptions about the collective planning, instruction, curriculum aspect of our school. We definitely want to see some cohesion in the grade level and subject area planning. And then all this is going to hopefully result in more rigor in our assessments and as a result, our instruction of our students. So the end goal is those student outcomes, but there's a lot of work behind the scenes that needs to take place before we get there. So what is that actually going to look like? For the initial rollout of this plan, it will be something that I think should be built on as we go. But you would start with 4 whole teaching staff curriculum sessions, 2 content-focused department meetings kind of weaved into that, and then individual coaching sessions. So I'll go through a little bit what that would look like and a little bit of the purpose for each of those. So this is the plan for those whole group sessions, and I think it would kind of roll out over 4 months, and we'd start with an initial discussion about the state of the curriculum, take a look at our assessments, a look at our standards, a look at our materials. Each of these would work back through that idea of curriculum. And if we think of what would go on in each of those, that first session is really a buy-in meeting. We want to collaborate to get, say, we saw these perceptions from you all. We're here to talk about that. And we're also going to start the process of looking at our curriculum maps. I don't know if necessarily the language is revisiting or revising, but saying that, we see some inconsistencies. We want to try to get on the same page here. Collaboration is how we're going to do that. Then the second session, we'll jump into those assessments. How are our assessments aligning with those curriculum maps? Are we seeing consistency with our planned units? If we're not, why do those inconsistencies exist? And how can we reach an understanding and collaborate on this piece? Then we look at our standards. How are our assessments covering our standards? Are we covering them to the full depth? And then finally, use that to take a look at our materials. Are the materials helping me to teach these standards, helping me to engage my students and do all that work? So all of these will kind of build off each other. And all contribute to that conversation of how are we revising our curriculum. The next step is the content-focused department meetings. And for those, the idea is that teachers need to be thinking about the specific ways of knowing and doing within their given subject. So we can do that somewhat with the whole staff there, but we really need to break out into math and English to get those more focused and also having that smaller community feel. A group of 10 English teachers versus 50 whole school is going to have a different environment. So we want smaller goals within those subgroups, want to have them feel like they have a voice in what are the needs for their department, and then think about how that fits into the larger plan. And then our second session would get more into those standards and thinking about how they exist within their content. And finally, the individual coaching sessions. So the why for the coaching sessions, teachers are going to be in all different places with this. So doing it with 40 or even with 10 teachers at a time is not necessarily going to get to the individual needs of everyone. And teachers are going to need support for implementing this in their class. So to bring about this deep lasting change, teachers need support in their sustained efforts to implement. So they kind of need someone to go back to and make sure that this is happening in their classroom, because when you walk out of a PD, things aren't just going to happen. So they need to know that there are those structures in place that are ensuring that this learning is happening and that we're turning the key and implementing them afterwards. And also that spaced learning is something that's going to help teachers to reflect on what they're learning and again implement it. So having between, and the initial rollout is a month between each big meeting and then these little ones going on in between, that having this spaced learning is going to help them to make sure that things are going on. So the how of this, they'd be one-on-one meetings with teachers. But it's really at teacher discretion. So a big piece of coaching is that it's encouraged, not required. So teachers kind of have to buy in to really get the purpose and the benefit of this. Observations are only at teacher request. The focus is going to be goal setting, again, determined by the teacher's needs and requests, but we're going to be encouraging them. We're going to see teachers who are struggling and say, hey, like this is something that we should talk about. Let's do one of these coaching sessions. It doesn't necessarily have to be any kind of formal language, but kind of encouraging them and showing them the benefits of that. So to give a visual of what that might all look like, the blue points are those big meetings, and then you can see all throughout one-on-one coaching is happening. Some people are going to need it at the beginning. Some people aren't going to be ready. As we go through the department meetings, more people will join in on that. So we kind of have the coaching going on all throughout, some space between our bigger meetings, and then department meetings kind of weaving in with those ideas. So that's kind of the big picture of all those pieces. And hopefully they bring us to these end goals that we discussed at the beginning, that there's better collaboration, more positive perceptions, cohesion, and rigor within the assessments that we're doing. And obviously we need to see if it worked so that we can revise. We're constantly revising along the way. But when we hit the end of the year, we also want to be thinking, okay, where do we go next? What are our next steps? So those teacher perception surveys will continue to exist throughout the entire process, and we'll have them at the end, and we'll see what that progression looks like. And then we'll do a reappraisal of the curriculum maps and the assessments that exist in kind of a similar way. Are we seeing standards applied appropriately? Is there consistency with how units are being planned, with how assessments are being rolled out? And then are there clear connections between standards taught, questions asked, and then do we see that questioning going deeper on our assessments and then hopefully in our actual instruction? So this should kind of build all the way down. And finally, the references for all of that. So this is our goal for where we kind of want to be going, how we want to get started with this. If you have any questions, feel free to send me any messages or follow up on the presentation.